Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sophia, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Ransom Riggs' last book in the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children series, The Desolations of Devil's Acre, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers and authors, we wouldn't be here today. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Ransom Riggs for the launch of the last book in the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children series, The Desolations of Devil's Acre. Ransom Riggs is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children novels. Riggs was born on a farm in Maryland and grew up in southern Florida. He studied literature at Kenyon College and film at the University of Southern California. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, bestselling author Tahara Mafi, and their family. Following Ransom on stage is Eva Chen. Eva is a first-generation Chinese American who grew up in New York City. She blames her deviation from pre-med at Johns Hopkins University on a love of fashion and beauty instilled in her by her mother. Previously the editor-in-chief of Lucky, Eva has also written for Elle, Vogue, Teen Vogue, Vogue China, The New York Times, and The Wall Street Journal. She is currently the head of fashion partnerships at Instagram. Eva lives in New York City with her husband and 2 children. She is the New York Times bestselling author of Juno Valentine and the Magical Shoes, A is for Awesome, Juno Valentine and the Fantastic Fashion Adventure, 321 Awesome, and Roxy the Last Unisaurus Rex. We will first begin with a discussion between Ransom and special guest Eva Chen. After Ransom and Eva's talk, we will be reappearing on stage to ask Ransom all of your questions. So remember to drop any in the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of your screen. Finally, we would like to thank our co-hosting event partners, Loyalty Bookstores and Books and Books. So without further ado, please first welcome Ransom Riggs to the stage.
Hello, hi everyone, how are you? I'm so thrilled to be here in my house, which is such a strange thing after 10 years of releasing these books and going on tour and getting to meet all you lovely people after I've spent so long writing it. It's wonderful to be able to go out into the real world and see people and remember that what I'm creating is actually a physical book and talk to people about it and have them tell me what they think. And it's a little scary and kind of wonderful, and it's a ritual I miss, but it's also amazing to be able to welcome so many people from potentially anywhere to this event. Last night we had people from all over the US and Germany, Mexico, and it was really great to have such a big tent for these events. So it is a blessing in that way, at least. And hopefully the next time I go out on tour, I'll be able to be at the Strand in person and see you guys in person in real life. But I want to jump pretty quickly into our discussion tonight. We've got the wonderful and amazing Eva Chen for about 20 minutes, and I'm going to take full advantage of that. We are going to answer lots of your questions and talk to one another and talk to you. So if you guys don't know who Eva Chen is, okay, maybe you don't have the internet, but she's all over it. She's super cool. She's like a quadruple threat of fashion and authorhood and tech guru-ness and all kinds of stuff. So I can't wait to talk to her. Eva, get in here. Let's start chatting.
And through the magic of the internet, here I am. I'm so excited to be here with you. And let me tell you, let me nerd out for a second, along with all of your fans who are like freaking out in the chats right now. I'm really excited to be here with you, hanging out with you with your like very aspirational bookshelf that's color-coded behind you. Like what? That's so fancy. And you and I first met through DM, I think. I was talking about your first book on Instagram stories, and we slid into each other's DMs and started chatting. And this is our first time kind of meeting in person. So it's kind of crazy that I am talking to you and moderating with you for the first time. So I'm excited to be here, but let's hop into questions because all of your followers and fans here are so excited. Like, you should read the comments where people are like, Ransom, so excited. So let's start rewinding for a bit, because I never want to assume that everyone here has been reading you for 10 years. There are new readers here, new fans, like young readers who are just discovering the series. So let's rewind to 2011, literally a decade ago. Tell us a little bit about like the process of writing the book, the photos that you found, how your filmmaker's eye really translated to the book. I want to hear the origin story.
The origin story, it was very weird. I was, well, I mean, it all begins when I was like 12 in South Florida, a bored boy at garage sales that I had been drugged to by my grandmother, if you want to go into that. I can make it quick. So my grandmother used to take me to these garage sales. I, as a 12-year-old boy, didn't have much interest in like old mystery novels or lightly used socks, but I did find a lot of old photographs in shoeboxes, and I would start to go through them and find ones that I thought were interesting. And I found this one when I was 12, and I was collecting a lot of baseball cards, and I would buy these for a nickel. And this girl looked uncannily like a girl I'd had an innocent summer camp crush on. And so I bought it and a few other things. And it was in a little frame, and it was in my room for a couple of months with my baseball cards and other things. And eventually, I took it out of its little board frame. And on the back, it said, Dorothy, Chicago, 15, died of leukemia. At approximately the age she is pictured here. And I, as a 15-year-old, hadn't known many people who had passed away, and it really hit me hard. And so from a young age, I think the power that these little photos could have was imparted to me. So flash forward, I'm in graduate school in LA. I was in the middle of film school, finishing film school, and trying to cheaply furnish my crappy apartment. And so I found myself at the Pasadena Rose Bowl swap meet, which is just a land of slightly overpriced vintage items. And I didn't go home with any furniture, but I did find a man who had a booth of old photos that he had collected and curated with like a museum curator's eye. And he was charging like 10, 20 bucks per photo, not 5 cents, but they were good and interesting. And I found this one I think I bought this from him. On the back says, "This is the bum Gloria is in love with." So I ended up doing a whole book of these talking pictures, things with funny or revealing or heartbreaking or interesting words written on the back, the sort of lost messages. But I was also at that time finding a lot of photos that I felt like were super cinematic and just sparked questions. What happened? And there was no writing on the back. There was no story. I had to make up that story because they were, completely lost, little orphaned. They were like orphans. I found this. This ended up being Millard. And so for a couple of years in film school, I'd been trying to, tell stories using pictures in a slightly different way, but my mind had been like retraining itself to work that way. And ever since I was a little kid, been writing, short stories longhand on legal pads. And I was a member of the local writers group at the library, which was all 75-year-olds and me, and they were writing their memoirs. And I was trying to be Stephen King when I was 12, and they were like really worried about me. So I took these photos to my editor at this little publisher in Philadelphia called Quirk Books. And I had done one book about Sherlock Holmes with them. And I said, I think this is something. I think maybe this is a story. And I had been nurturing the story about kids with powers that weren't quite powers. They weren't super. They ran this sort of gamut spectrum of like ability to disability, and they had a dark side and a light side. And my first idea should have been write a novel, but it was write a book of poetry. And so I did. I took these photos and I would write these Edward Gorey-esque things. Both Anna's parents were dragged off and confined when they swore she could move things with only her mind, and so on and so forth. And my editor said, "That's a bad idea. You should write a novel." Which I shouldn't have needed permission to write one, but I think in my head, it was such a big thing, writing a novel. And I was, but a 27-year-old or something, and I didn't know that I could do it. And I had only ever written short stories, but I just, I wanted to be a screenwriter. So I felt free to screw up and write a bad novel, and it wouldn't cost me anything and it wouldn't be a big deal. So I just went for it. And I wrote a really bad, not bad, it just was super wrong first draft of this book, which was an epistolary novel written in the form of letters that Jacob was writing about his trip to the island to a girl back home whom we only realized halfway through the book died in a car crash like 6 months ago, and Jacob hasn't wrapped his mind around it yet. And thus, all the peculiar children on the island that he's met may or may not be like a PTSD figment of his, shattered mind. And I took this manuscript and I never even gave it to my editor. I just said, I think I would commit wholeheartedly to the fantasy and the portal and the children and the island and the magic and make this real. And so I threw that away and I started over, and then I wrote pretty much the book as it stands today.
Wow. You have some fans who are saying, honestly, they would have loved to read that book. Why did you throw it away? And it's also not too late, Ransom, to publish that poetry. There are a lot of Edward Gorey fans here who are shouting you out as well. Now, you mentioned Millard, and there are some Millard super fans in this group. Like one of the comments was Millard is king. Do you play favorites with the characters? Is there one who like tugs at your heartstrings more? Is there one you identify most with? Is there one where you're like, kind of find this person annoying, but like going to keep them in because they're important to the plot? Like any kind of insider secrets there?
After the first book, when I was plotting out the second book, my editor at the time said to me, this is a lot of characters. Do you think some of them could drown maybe on the way to the mainland after they escape the island? I was like, well, I like them. So I didn't do that, thankfully. But it is a lot of characters, but I think that they are all different facets of my personality to one degree or another. Millard is the like pretentious know-it-all who will chew your ear off at a party. I'm that guy sometimes. Enoch is the, pessimistic grump. That's me. Emma is strong and fierce, and Bronwyn is loyal and protective. And I think I'm a bit of all those people at one time or another, but I find myself gravitating toward Millard because he's fun to write, Enoch because he's fun to write, Miss Peregrine because she's the explainer, but she does it in a way that I think is fun. And then, maybe Claire doesn't get so many lines because she's a little bit of a suck up and feels young, is young, so I think I do play favorites.
Okay, so far in the group, I would say Millard is by far the favorite. Enoch is the second favorite, and a strong contingent thinks that you like Emma the most. But it's good to hear that you feel like each of them fits your different facets of your personality. And I do feel like one of the things that people love about the books is that they can see themselves in the different characters, and they can identify and find comfort or humor or whatever emotion they need to feel in the books. Someone saying Claire is just a tad bit sassy. Okay, so did you know from the beginning that the series, like, did you have in your mind that it would span this many books? Did you have an end or destination in sight as you were writing? Or are you kind of more of the writer that's like, I'm just going to go along with it and see what comes of it?
So I think you guys will sense a theme as I go into answering these questions that I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I just fumbled my way through as best as I could. I thought the first book was it. Although I really did not think that book would do well. It was marketed toward teenagers, but it was full of old black and white photos, and it didn't really have a genre. It was like 5 different genres, and I just didn't think it was going to do very well. And even though I really enjoyed writing it, and I wanted to explore that world more, so I left the ending wide open, the doors gapingly open, kind of hoping that I would be asked or allowed to write more. And then I was. it was, the book did well, so I got to write more, and it was great. So I thought book 2 would be it. I'm going to write one more. That's it. This isn't going to be a long thing. I'm going to wrap it up. But halfway through Hollow City, I was like, this is a big story, and it's good. This is going to have to be 2 books. But that's it. Just the 2 books. Just the 2 books. So I got to the end of Library of Souls, and it ended in this with I don't know if you guys haven't read this yet, but it's 7 years old, so spoilers are okay now. It ended with all the kids being freed from their bonds of time and being able to come visit Jacob in America. And I thought that's a nice place to end it. But then, I tried to walk away, and I kept thinking, I wonder what they're doing in America. It'd be cool to explore America in, the peculiar world. And so eventually I just had to go back. And by the time I, was going to write a book 4, I knew it was going to be another 3. I was going to stop making that mistake and just commit. So I think the books always wanted to be this many books. I just didn't know it.
Your books had a plan for you. You just didn't know it. It was preordained. It was pre-written in the stars. Yeah. And now the series is wrapping up 10 years later. And you had the book birthday for the last book in the series yesterday. I know the book came out. I know a lot of your fans stayed up all night reading it already, and they're really tired, but they're here representing. Tell us about how you felt like when you mentioned you do some longhand, but I'm assuming you write on a word processor or like a laptop, or I don't know. I can kind of see you writing on an old-fashioned typewriter, like clacking away, maybe smoking a pipe like Miss Peregrine, maybe with like a newsboy cap on. I don't know. But tell me about the feeling of the finality of finishing the series and how you felt. Like, was it relief? Was it sadness? Was it grief that you're done with something? Like, what was the feeling like?
It was immense relief in many ways, because I knew the end was coming for a long time, but I didn't know if I would stick the landing. I wanted to leave the characters in a place that both the reader and me could think back after having finished the series and feel okay about it, and feel like, oh, they're in a good place. It's all right, and I didn't exactly know how I was going to do it until I came to the last scene of that last book, and I was like, here it is. And then it was really emotional. I teared up a little bit writing that scene and even editing it a couple of times. So, yeah, it was a big deal for me. And I hope that readers who stuck with the series for a long time feel like their devotion and attention has been, I don't know, rewarded or honored or something. I feel like, sometimes books don't do that. Sometimes you're reading a book for a long time, and just like I don't know, the character you've come to love is just like run over by a truck in the last page, and you're like, that feels disrespectful.
That is disrespectful. And guys, let me tell you, that does no spoilers. I've done many a book panel at this point, and my first one I ever did, I totally spoiled a book, and like the audience literally like came after me with pitchforks. I didn't spoil it. I spoiled like 3 books ago in like the 8-book series, which I thought was fair game, but people were like, that was not fair game. But one of your fans, Maya, says that when she reads the book, she feels like there's another 7 that have like yet to be written. She was very specific with the number, and so I'm just putting that out there, Ransom. Like, I guess, would you say never say never? Do you think you could revisit this in the future, or do you have new stories you want to tell?
I will say that I have been, between every book, I have tried to write something else, and been pulled back in. I have come up with whole stories, outlines, treatments, story Bibles for other novels, and then been like, no, I have to write another Peculiar Children novel. So I think I need to write something else. But I also think I left the door open, and I would like to return one day. And there will be a little surprise for fans coming fairly soon, which is will be in paper form that you can purchase at a book establishment. So I'll tell you more about that when I can.
That was an Easter egg to end all Easter eggs. Very exciting. Okay, so you have a lot of aspiring writers in this group of fans. You also have a lot of fans who started collecting photos because of you and who started going to flea markets and garage sales. And they're my competition, apparently, for antiques because I'm constantly antiquing. Yeah, people are freaking out at the Easter egg you just gave. But they want to know a little bit more about your creative process because writing, I write children's books, like true picture books for like 5-year-olds. And if that is a process to write like 800 words, I cannot imagine the process.
My daughter is a fan, by the way.
Oh,
we have the June and Valentine books and she loved them.
Thank you. That makes me so happy. My books are about like unicorns, by the way, and like happiness and glitter. They're not like, there aren't pictures of like floating kids and like slightly creepy, like staring at a lake with like double reflections coming back. But anyway, tell us a little bit about the process like of writing just to inspire. There are so many aspiring writers in this audience who love your story and want to be writers themselves. And I'm sure you remember wanting to be a writer and wanting to know other writers. Like I've always wanted to like pick Stephen King's brain about like how he does it. That'll be my next panel. But yeah, tell us a bit about that.
Well, I have figured it out, you know, on your dime and on the fly over the years. So I guess I was 30 when I started, and I had been writing in one form or another for a long time, you know, short stories and screenplays and all kinds of stuff. So I think I got a lot of my bad writing out before I started this novel, thankfully. I think the old thing Malcolm Gladwell said about, you know, you've got to do something bad for 10,000 hours before you can do it well. I think I did 10,000 hours of bad writing prior to Miss Peregrine. So maybe I was lucky with the timing. But the process with these books, it's odd because they are, you know, illustrated with photographs. And it's changed a bit, the way I integrate those pictures with the book over the years. In the beginning, the photos were a lot more instrumental and a lot more a part of the genesis of the story. I had the story, but I didn't have all the characters. And so in some way, all these pictures functioned as like, you know, headshots might to a casting director. I would have these and go, well, who's this? And I need someone for that scene. And maybe this is, you know, someone who can do something, you know, interesting with their body or whatever. And I would find a picture that fit that. And then, you know, organically try to integrate it in the story. After the first novel, you know, the story and most of the characters were established, and really the plot had its momentum, and the, you know, illustrations had to honor that rather than hijack it. So it got a lot more difficult. It was just like, I've got some cool pictures. It was like, I need a picture of a Zeppelin floating over a beach at dawn. There are, you know, and it has to be an old photo and has to be like of the same graphical nature, you know, probably taken in the 20s or 30s. How the hell am I going to find that? So from that second novel on, I've just been like, I'm going to run out. I'm not going to find it. This time, my ruse is going to be laid bare, and everyone will see that I am but a fraud, and these photos are not actually take place in the world, and it's just not going to work. And somehow I would just always find a picture that fit perfectly, or I'd change the story just enough to fit the picture. And it sort of worked. But the photos became much less important as the series went on, and the books, you know, became much more about my own imagination.
Okay, before I get kicked off, because I see Sophia about to kick me off, I have like a few burning questions. I'm sorry, I have to ask. Number one, did you style your bookshelf yourself? Like, tell me about the books back there. I
have to give full credit to my wife, Tahada Mafi, who is an amazing designer of words, clothes, and books on shelves. Some of those are books we've collected over the years, and some of them are books by the foot that you can get from One King's Lane in red or green. And, you know, we have a lot of non-old books, but we thought that those should go somewhere else, and these would look better all in one.
Okay, as a fashion editor, former fashion editor, I had to ask about the aesthetic. Second thing, and this is like, I think your fans want this, but also I would love to read, it's less of a question, more of a statement, I guess. Abe Portman, he needs a spinoff, just saying. And who would he be, in my mind, outside of the movie, of course, I'm I think that he could have a whole separate series. I'm just putting that out there, putting that on the table, slight fan request. So just saying.
I want to know more about
is for you as a 12-year-old going through, and this is, there are some of your followers and fans are younger here. And so this is really them. When you were 12-year-old, 15-year-old, and you wanted to be a writer, and you're hanging out with these 75-year-olds at these garage sales, can you tell us, was that a time you felt different from other people? Do you feel like now your differences are your superpower? How did you find confidence throughout time? And that's for the young ones in the audience who have expressed similar things in the comments.
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think growing up in a as a child in a retirement town, I always felt different. But I felt like I always had a secret. I was always working on something as a kid, be it a story or some little project or something, and it was like something I wouldn't even tell anyone about. I would just be working on it and nurturing it, and I'd be like, whatever you people think of me, I've got this secret, and having that gave me power somehow, and it felt like an amulet of protection. And in some ideas still feel like that. And when I don't have an idea I'm burning to make into reality, I feel like my protection is gone and I get nervous.
I love that, and thank you for saying that. And I do think everyone on this line watching, protect your peculiarity. Ooh, that's a hard word to say. I guess you're used to it, but peculiarity is a hard word. It does not stumble over.
I still stumble.
Yeah, but protecting your magic is so important. And for the people watching who want to be writers or dream of being a writer, practice makes perfect. Do it. You can do it too. I love seeing in the comments how many of you want to be writers. It is the ultimate book lover's dream, I think. So thank you, Ransom, for having me. It's my son's birthday, so I'm going to go eat 4 slices of cake right now. Need to sugar up. But it's really an honor to do this with you. I'm such a fan, super fan. And I cannot wait. I haven't received a new book yet, so don't worry. That no one had to worry about spoilers from me. But I cannot wait to read it and love it and share it. And I'll see you on my Instagram DMs at some point soon.
Thanks, Eva. Thank you for being part of this. This was really great. And yeah, I'll see you online.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And happy birthday.
Oh. Okay. Now it is just the two of us. We're going to dive into all these questions. A lot of them have been answered already by our wonderful chat with Eva earlier. But we're going to go right in. The first one is about the movie. How do you feel about the movie, and what input did you have in it, if any?
So my input was pretty limited, but I grew to love the movie, especially as I saw it being made and I saw early cuts of it. I just thought, this is a beautiful thing. And I'd always been a fan of Tim Burton. I've been a film nerd since way back, and just the idea that he was working on this blew me away. And he, is the kind of creator who needs to make an idea his own. So it didn't surprise me that he would change things about the story to fit his own imagination, and that's fine. So the way I think about the movie is it's in the same neighborhood as my book, but it's like the house down the street, or on the next street over or something. They're in the same universe. And they complement one another, but it is not the same exact story, which is okay.
Yeah, they're like cousins. They're like cool cousins.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of Abe Portman, would you do a story focusing on the childhood of Miss Peregrine?
Sure. If I had infinite life and, I could tell every story I ever wanted to tell, I would go into the backstory of every these characters. They would all get their own novel. I could just go on and on. Unfortunately, I have to prioritize. So that's one of those maybes that's just floating around out there, kind of like what were Abe's early years in America like? That would be an interesting story to tell. What about the formation of the Hollow Hunters and their, many adventures fighting the Hologast and the Whites in America? That'd be really cool. I don't know if I'll ever write it, but I do think about that from time to time. So you never know.
That's cool. With such a large world and so many characters, really the possibilities are endless. We've got an excellent question from Kristen. What have you been reading and what would you recommend?
I'm reading a book called Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff, which is awesome and delightful. And it's going to be an HBO series from Jordan Peele. So if read it before it comes out on HBO. And before that, I read Zone 1, Colson Whitehead's zombie apocalypse novel from 2011, which is eerily prescient and talks a lot about plagues and quarantines. And it's the most beautiful and literary zombie novel you will ever read, for sure.
Oh, a literary zombie novel. That's definitely on my list now. Ooh.
Yeah. And before that, I was reading this journal that Arthur Conan Doyle wrote when he was a young man and went on a Arctic whaling expedition. And he kept a handwritten journal.
I feel like a show was made based off of that, like very loosely based off of that, where it's like the whaling expedition gets stranded out there. Maybe I'm misremembering. What was your?
I don't know. I haven't finished it yet. Oh, it was a spoiler though. Terrible spoiler.
No, I think I'm
perhaps
the wrong story.
I mean, I know he doesn't die. He has to go on to write the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Yes. So that's already a hint. Okay. What was your inspiration to introduce the plot of the 7 Peculiars from the prophecy plot?
Prophecies are very useful in fiction, in fantastical tales. They motivate characters to do all sorts of things they might never do any other way. And it was a quest. I needed a quest. I feel like this is really like the gears, the nuts and bolts, but you've got to get your characters out of the house doing something dangerous. And that was a good way to do it. And that thing should probably save the world if it succeeds. And if they don't succeed, all is lost.
The stakes are always high with a prophecy, I've found.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one focusing a bit more on characters. What, if you can, elaborate more on the process to build the personality for each character, if you had one, or if they all came to you through the air?
It never comes like fully formed to me. It's kind of like building a giant ball of crumpled up tinfoil. You just keep sticking on pieces, going, oh, I'll have him do that. That would be interesting. And then that becomes a part of that person's character. And you just go, oh, I made that decision, so I'm going to use that to lead me over here. Because the problem, the difficulty with fiction is that possibilities are endless. You start with a blank page. The first thing you need to do is start shutting down possibilities and winnowing your potential path, or you'll just be paralyzed. So sometimes I just have characters do stuff when I don't know them very well, see if it feels right. And then if it does, that becomes an important part of who they are. It tells you something important about them. And then I'm like, well, I can't do the opposite of that anymore. So good. Whew. Some fewer possibilities for me to have to contemplate every time this character comes on to the page.
It must be like meeting almost like a new person every time you make a new character, and just sort of like, what will happen next?
Yeah. I mean, some of these characters are like much more important, you know, oh, here's a pivotal character we're going to be with for many chapters. And then there are characters who you'll see for a minute, you know, and you only have to allude to them having a full and three-dimensional life, but they may say one line.
That's really cool. I mean, it's all very cool. That's super cool.
It's sort of like in Hollywood, you know, you go on the Universal tour, the backlot tour,
Yeah.
and then you go behind the houses, and you're like, that's not a real house. It's held up by plywood and sticks. Well, you know,
there's still a little bit of I find that there's still a little bit of magic behind that too. Just sort of like the thing I love has another face.
Yeah.
A bit more personal. Have you ever felt different when you were a child or a teenager? And if you did, how did you deal with it?
I mean, you know, I felt different to a degree, but, you know, in retrospect, I was like a straight white guy. So, you know, in a town full of similar people, it wasn't too challenging. But I grew up, you know, in like a pretty somewhat like rednecky state, and with a lot of old people, and I don't know, just like with proclivities and interests that a lot of people didn't share or care about, you know, liking things people didn't really care about. And, you know, I would talk to them about whatever I was interested in. They'd be like, that's weird, you know, which makes you feel like no one understands you. But that seems to be a pretty normal teenage phenomenon. So looking back on it, I think I was a pretty normal teenager who just felt alienated in like pretty normal teenage ways. But when I found I was very lucky in a couple of ways. I ended up going to a gifted school full of nerds. It had no sports teams, and it was perfect for me because it was just, there was no, you know, beat up the nerds, jocks rule. It was called Pineview School in Sarasota, Florida, and it was a pretty great place to go to school for me. And then when I was in high school, I started for 3 or 4 summers, I went to this thing called the Young Writers Workshop, which was held, it's done through the University of Virginia, and it was held at the University of Virginia for years. And it's not anymore, but it's still part of that program. And I went to this place and I felt like I found my tribe. It was all these like, you know, out there kids who wanted to do songwriting and playwriting and fiction and poetry and just be weird and creative together. And so I think I realized the previous summer I'd gone to a horse camp that was all kids who thought I was super weird and, you know, would like push me into the electrified fence. I don't know why they kept it electrified when there were a bunch of kids around. But anyway, so the contrast between those 2 summers was insane. And it made me realize like, it's all about finding your tribe, you know, and sometimes it takes a while to find them, but you know, they're out there if you keep looking. So don't give up.
You definitely, I feel like you can definitely feel that with the sort of narrative throughout the Miss Peregrine's stories of just sort of like feeling like an outcast, but finding other people like you, other people who identify the same way you do, and sort of making your home, making a new home within that new home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you know, it's really a story about finding a family. Family is your home, but sometimes your first family isn't your home, and you have to find the right one.
Yeah. It's so wholesome. If you, I had this same question, so I'm glad someone was on the same wavelength as me. Lee asks, if you had to pick, what peculiarity would you have?
I am a somewhat obsessive photographer, and it has always bugged me to no end that I will see a picture I want to take of something happening over there, you know, like a photogenic old man leaning into a certain slant of light, and I'm like, that's perfect. But by the time I get my camera out and I get the right lens on it, it's changed. Or I don't have the guts to go up there and be like, can I take your picture? And you know, that doesn't work at all. But I would love to be able to Imbrn like freeze time and then just go over and take it. That'd be great. Or just take pictures with my eyes by blinking.
Ooh, that's so powerful. That's definitely like a top tier peculiarity, in my opinion. We've had a couple questions in this kind of vein, but again, on characters, are there any real life people who inspired certain characters, either visually or emotionally, or, you know, their involvement, you know, one moment in your life involvement spurned a whole character in the books?
I think there's a lot of my grandmother in Miss Peregrine. She was a really strong, cool, brilliant lady who she had 4 boys, helped run a 300-acre farm while teaching English, Latin, and French at a school for girls. And she would read a novel every day. And she read to me all the time. She instilled in me my love for books. And she was like sassy, no nonsense, you know, really cool lady. So I think there's a lot of her in Miss Peregrine. Also, there was a guy I knew growing up in Florida who was a sort of like a punk redneck with a giant mohawk and a thick Southern accent who drove a really old beat up Crown Victoria and would let people hit it for $1 a swing with a baseball bat. So he's in the book too.
That's amazing. Those are characters that like never, those are people that never like leave your mind. So it makes sense that they would make their way into such a large creative world. So, would you like to see a series like this story be made as a Netflix miniseries, kind of like in the vein of Series of Unfortunate Events? Is that something you thought about?
Yeah, actually, I think that'd be a good way to go if we were going to, you know, revisit the series in a filmed capacity. I like how much room there is to tell a long story, and this is a long story.
Yeah. I mean, Netflix miniseries are very in, so it's like the potential is there. Okay. Have you considered writing short stories of the past lives of the children before they join the home, like tales in the similar vein of Tales of the Peculiar? Would you do another short collection like that?
Maybe. I have thought about it. That's all I can say. I can't make any promises, but the idea does appeal to me.
Okay. It's a very layered answer, which we will not.
Trying to answer without teasing too much, you know, but
I will not.
I like all these ideas. I'm not like, you know, going to slam my laptop shut and storm out of the room. I think I'd read that book. That's cool.
How did you pick the word peculiar to describe the universe and the people?
I don't remember. That's a great question. I think it just seemed, I don't know, it hadn't been taken, you know. It's kind of like why the children live in Wales and not Scotland, because Harry Potter lives in Scotland, and King Arthur is from England, and, you know, it's too known. But Wales felt like somewhat, you know, untainted territory that I could write on, right? A blank slate. No offense to the Welsh. And the word peculiar kind of felt like I don't know, any big, you know, book, movie, property, anything that has that word in it. And stuff like strange and weird just felt flat and too on the nose. And like no one would call themselves that. They refer to themselves as peculiar. So it has to have a certain dignity and honor to it. And that felt like it wasn't a pejorative term. Whereas if they call themselves weirdos or something, it'd be like they're just insulting themselves.
Yeah. And like it makes total sense, because like peculiar isn't necessarily like bad or good. It's just kind of like factual, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
What book did you enjoy writing the most? If you had to pick a book favorite out of the stable.
You know, it was probably Library of Souls. I feel like my answer changes every time I answer this question, my answer changes a little bit. But Library of Souls was really fun to write. I got to create Devil's Acre, which is one of my favorite locations and worlds. It's like a world within a world. And I really liked where it ended. It's the same reason I really like this book. But there was less that I could create out of whole cloth, completely new in this book, because there was so much already there. And I what this book needed to do was answer questions, tie up loose threads, and resolve this like 2,000 pages worth of story that had happened, hopefully in a satisfying way. So I had a lot to do, and I couldn't just be like, hey, creating a whole new world. I mean, they do go to a whole, like, several loops that you've never seen before, and a lot of surprising things happen. But it was really fun creating Devil's Acre. So I think Library of Souls is my favorite. Tales of the Peculiar was really fun to write too, but that's not like a canon series book, so I didn't say that.
Cool. Okay. This one's a bit more on your writing process. Can you talk about any rituals you have while writing? Listening to music, certain snacks, writing at certain points of the day, etc.
If you can call espresso a snack, I usually have 2 ounces of espresso in a cup about that big, in a warmed cup, and I make the coffee myself. I'm a big coffee nerd. It's got to be good. I could do a whole live on just making coffee. Well, I won't do that. But that's my ritual. I work in the same office as my wife, Tahada. Mm-hmm. We have desks like right next to each other, and we've learned to coexist like very productively over the years. And it's really cool to have someone I can just turn to and be like, hey, is this a terrible idea or a good idea? Or whatever. She does the same thing to me. So we have like an in-room, like proto editor who we really trust, which is cool.
That's really amazing, especially to have someone so readily available to just spitball an idea at. Is like, I find the envy of probably many an author. Okay. Do you think your book series would appeal more towards teens or adults? Because I personally find that YA is very malleable, and so a lot of adults read YA and not just teenagers.
Yeah.
Especially with a 10-year series.
I agree. When I wrote it, I didn't set out to make it YA when I was writing the book. And then when I gave it to my editor, he just pointed out that like all the main characters are 16. So it should be a YA book. And I was like, oh, yeah, but kids aren't going to like these old photos. And he was like, well, let's see.
And then now.
And so a lot of teenagers read it. I also had a lot of adults read it. And now a lot of the people who read it as teenagers are adults, and they're still reading them. So it's all over the map. Yeah, I think YA doesn't have to be one thing or the other.
Agreed. I remember when the box set for the first trilogy came out, and it was like you got 10 like photos in the set. And I was just like, oh, that's great. I want that too. I already have the paperbacks, but sure, let's get the hardcovers. And that's exactly what it was.
That's how they get you.
Yeah, and it gives a very fun tactile aspect to a series that you already love. So it just kind of makes you love it more from a reader perspective.
Yeah. I love putting out like real objects in the world that are part of the series, like the Devil's Acre map. I haven't even gotten a printed copy of it yet. I can't wait to hold it in my hands, but people who've gotten it tell me it's cool. I really enjoy that. It's kind of like why I wanted to write Tales of the Peculiar. It was a thing I really enjoyed making inside the world of the books, and then let's make a real book of it. That'd be kind of cool. So the photos that was a similar impulse.
Yeah, it's very cool, for lack of a better word. Okay, we've got one last question. It shifted. I still kind of remember it. Okay. Have you seen any cosplays of any of the characters from the books? Do you have a favorite one you've seen? Probably not recently since we're all trapped at home, but.
Yeah. Well, I got to go on tour a year ago. The timing was uncanny. It was like January 2020, right before everything shut down. I drove across the country in a van for Conference of the Birds. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that right before everything stopped. And every time a book comes out, at some point during the tour, I see a few cosplays, and it's always fun. I've seen some great Miss Peregrines, especially since the movie came out, because it was so visual, and like Colleen Atwood's costumes were really amazing. And so people are kind of like, they had that as a reference point to grab onto. There's kids in the books, but it's not really all about their, they're not as I don't know what I would say. Colleen Atwood made the costumes. They look amazing, so she put a fine point on a lot of these people, and now you can cosplay that in a way that feels super, tactile. And
like,
anyway, I've seen great Enochs. I've seen great Hues, and people will bring bees with them or have them like somehow suspended around them in a cloud. I've seen a lot of Olives. No one has managed to float except in photos. No one really does Jacob. There's no, he's not that peculiar, right? So even though he's really peculiar, he doesn't look super interesting. So people don't usually do him. Sometimes people do Emma, but I haven't seen that in person. But so usually it's like, yeah, Miss Peregrine or Enoch or Hugh. And I love it. Thank you for dressing up as the characters, and it feels good.
It's probably like seeing the characters you've imagined like come to life in a way, just sort of like you in the real world. Hello.
I always do a double take. Like, am I dreaming? Oh, right. So crazy. Life imitating art, imitating life.
Yeah. And with that was our last question of the night. Thank you a billion for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes.
I want to thank all you guys for being here. And I got to say, before we get out of here, anyone who has the VIP ticket, I will see you not on the Crowdcast app, but on your Looped app on your phone. So I'll start doing that right after we hang up here.
Yep. If all of you in our chat have not already purchased a copy of The Desolations of Devil's Acre, I don't know what you're waiting for. There's a purchase button at the bottom middle of your screen that you can purchase your copy from Books and Books. And with that, we're signing off for the night, except for you lovely lucky few who get to go to the meet and greet. And with that, everyone have a safe night. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody. This was really, really fun. And I'll see you online.